Well, welcome to Ask a Responsive Fundraiser, where we take your questions to a fundraising expert so that ultimately you can grow generosity. And today we're taking your questions to Tim Lockie. Now, Tim is the founder of the Human Stack and a pioneer in nonprofit technology with over 20 years of experience. He's the creator of Digital Guidance, an approach that helps nonprofits balance human centered strategies with tech solutions to drive real impact. Tim helps organizations bridge the gap between people and technology, ensuring nonprofits thrive in today's digital age. Tim, thanks for taking the time to answer some questions today.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. It's great to be here.
All right, we're going to jump into our first question, which is this. We struggle to measure and in turn communicate our impact beyond financial numbers. So, what steps can we take to tell the story of the real difference that we're making?
Yeah, I think that that's a very common experience that people have when dealing with tech. And I want to talk a little bit about why I think that that's an issue for people. And it goes into the anatomy between stories and data, right?
Mm,
So there's a chain of events that has to happen in order to convert what happens in technology and what happens in the data that we collect into a story. So data has to convert to information. That's like the reports and analytics that we have. That has to convert to insight, which is our way of understanding that. And that insight has to convert then to a story, right?
mm,
When you disconnect stories from data and from any that's manipulation, that's lying, right? that's
yeah,
that's false advertising is definitely stories that are disconnected from data and don't really exist, right? And so I think that what's so important around thinking about the ways that we connect what we measure to the story that we tell is to understand that chain of events, because some of that
mm,
gets really practical. Like, what data are you collecting and how does that relate to a story? The other thing to say about that, and there's miles of territory to cover in what that chain looks like, so I'm going to skip over that and
yeah,
just say, but who's in charge of each of those steps is actually really relevant. In most organizations, staff are generating most of the data, directors are converting most of that into information,
mm,
executives then are looking at that insight level, and communities are who owns the stories at the end of that. And I think that
yeah,
last piece is something we have to really wrap our heads around. These aren't our stories, right? As fundraisers, we're talking about the stories of the communities that we're in. I love the ways that we're now discussing ethical storytelling, because
mm,
it really is driving us back to a lot of the way that we're telling those stories. And one other, piece that's really important about that is to ensure that those stories that we're telling are creating dignity for
yeah,
the people that we're telling them of and people that we're telling them to. The more we keep that in mind, the more those stories actually interact with our data in a way that creates value for all participants, for our organization and for the participants and for the donors that we're aligned with.
yeah. I think that's super helpful and really great too to help people zoom out and see those sort of elements you need to put together to really make a complete picture of a story, but then also how to walk through that, like you said, in a way that shows dignity to all. That's really helpful. All right, the second question is this. Our organization has invested in several digital tools, but our team's struggling to use them effectively. So, how can we align our technology with our team's skills and our needs to ensure that we're making the most of these platforms?
Yeah, this is such a great question. I spent years thinking about why is it so hard to get technology to do what we want it to do. And sometimes I talk about it like learning to drive. Like, we've bought these really commercial grade, cars that need a commercial driver's license, and a lot of organizations don't know how to drive a fleet of these technologies that we have, right? And so I think that there's a lot to do with just the basic skills that we have as an organization to use these tools collectively. So I think that's one piece of it. But if you boil all of it down and you just say, listen, there are problems in our technology, that we like. There's things that we don't know how to do in our technology. And if you say of that bucket of things that we don't know how to do, whether they're identified or not, whether people have said, I don't know how to find things in a browser window, right? Super simple thing that will
Yeah.
take someone a lot of time if they don't know, right? So really simple. If we just break those down into lowercase issues that we really don't know, that we could solve ourselves, right? Inside the organization could really effectively solve these. And uppercase issues, right? These are issues that we'd have to hire someone outside of us, somebody like me, to come and fix, right?
Yeah.
If an organization got really adept at being able to surface, issues at all, and then separate them into uppercase and lowercase, and they just focused on the lowercase, they would find their ability to create a cycle where they're solving little problems that are at the edges of their organizations, furthest away from IT, right? If they
Yeah.
started to solve some of those problems and got good at that, that pattern of behavior in their organization would create a culture that finds things they can solve. And
Mm.
those big issues, like maybe they need to bring somebody in, but they'll only know which things to bring in after they've really, really done a lot of work in lowercase issues. Great example of a lowercase issue would be something like in Virtuous, there are tasks, right? There's a way to use tasks effectively. Well, if people have got tasks in Google and they've got tasks in Slack and they've got tasks all over the place, learning as a team how to put those tasks in one system and work on them together. They just took a month to work on that lowercase issue. They can all do this. They
Yeah.
would start to find that if they just addressed a few of these kinds of things, their technology would be a lot more effective to use. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it totally does, and I think it's helpful. Sometimes it's like, hey, is there a silver bullet? Is there like, and it's no. There's these steps that you can take, and really, like you said, it's doing the work and then creating that pattern that I think is really helpful for people.
It's also reversing the question, right? Because the question is, how do we align our technology with, our needs? Actually, one of the ways to think about it is to align your needs with the technology, right?
Mm,
How do we take what it already does, and how do we shift what we're doing so that it meets it halfway?
yeah.
So I think that that's important. One of the reasons I talk about the uppercase and lowercase is really interesting is that I asked my wife, like, what percent of words in a book do you think are, or letters, sorry, what percent of letters in a book are uppercase versus lowercase? She just mathed it out. She got it right. It's between 2 and 4%, right?
Okay.
So um, and if you tried to read a book of uppercase letters, you could never do it. There's just too
Yeah.
few letters, right? If you read a book from just the lowercase letters, you could make it work. I think that's part of what I'm trying to point out is that this is where most of the issues are. And so it allows you to read the tech, it allows you to read the problems in a different way.
Yeah, that's a super helpful analogy, and yeah, I really appreciate that. All right, can we jump into question three here? It's the last one
Absolutely.
that we
Let's do
have.
it.
Awesome. It says this: we're facing fatigue among our donors and are noticing a decline in the usual engagement that we've seen. Are there ways that technology can help to kind of create those more personalized connections with supporters and help reverse donor fatigue?
This is um I think that I'm going to speak specifically to the tech side of this.
Yeah.
So, like Mallory Erickson is like a great person to look at around alignment with donors and addressing donor fatigue specifically.
Mm,
On the technology side, though, I think AI is opening completely new opportunities for the ways that we can engage donors more personally.
yeah.
So, one example of that is to um, pull what you know about a donor and what they're interested into a safe, like non-data sharing LLM, right? Turn off all of the share with the
Right.
or train the models for everyone, right? But
Yep.
inside of that, really start to ask questions. What is this person interested in? Where have they donated before? Where is their alignment on that? And what approach would we take? if we were going to approach this donor, right? And
Mm.
so I think that that's a good way to approach the donors that you are working with that are major givers, right? And on your sustainer side, there are LLMs that allow you to interact with a CRM, pull down some of your sustainers, look at factors inside of there, create really specific, tailored approaches to them inside of fields in your CRM, and then push those back into your CRM. So that you're really actually getting very, very specific about that. And I
Yeah.
think that, if you combine that with maturity models like Virtuous has created, which I'm a huge fan of, I think both your ability to do that as a team and to interact with that data and think about your data as something that can be improved by an LLM becomes very, very powerful. And so, again, I think that these are steps that teams can learn. They can be really effective, they're very affordable, and they're super repeatable and scalable.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Tim, thank you so much for taking some time today to answer these questions, to provide your insight and your expertise. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah. Keep up the great work. I'm always a big fan of what Virtuous is doing.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Thank you.